Hi. So, every morning, I wake up. I know, don't we all? And the first thing I do generally when I wake up is that I open my computer. Because yes, my computer sleeps next to me because I'm an academic. And generally, the first thing I do is that I check my feed of newly published papers just to get me something to think in the shower. And so 2 days ago, I stumbled upon this really, really amazing study that I couldn't refrain from sharing to you. And it was conducted just up the road from us at the University of Amsterdam. And what they did is that they asked a bunch of people to come into their lab. And they had them sit in an MRI scanner. An MRI scanner is essentially a big magnet that allows researchers as well as doctors to record brain activity and know exactly where it comes from. And so what the participants were seeing when they were sitting in this MRI scanner were pictures of, say, tomatoes or strawberries or clover leaves and cucumbers. Items that we know are typically either red or green. But as you can see from that display, the items were never shown in their original color. In fact, the researchers picked a color that sat right in the middle between red and green. A horrible, horrible brown. I don't advise you to use in any design. It'll be horrible. But what happened in the brain of the participants doing this task, which was just seeing these pictures, was really mind-blowing. When the participants saw this tomato in this horrible brown, their visual areas, their visual cortices, produced activity that was typical of when people see red objects. And the same happened for the clover leaf. When people saw this clover leaf and this horrible brown, they saw green. And this is exactly what just happened in your brains. You see, what you know about objects, the fact that you know that tomatoes are red and clover leaves are green, changes, biases the way that even your visual cortex responds to it. And if you think that this only happens in the confound of this lab at the University of Amsterdam, you're wrong, because this is exactly what is behind this very well-known phenomenon of the dress, which split the entire internet into thinking that it is either gold or white or black and blue. It actually is black and blue, but what we know about how light shines on objects changes how half of the internet sees it. So hold on to that thought, because I'm about to point out a really, really, really mind-blowing fact. Humans speak. I know. But it needs to be pointed out because it is so obvious that we forget about it. We're surrounded by words every day, and yet we completely forget about it. Language is this really amazing ability that allows us to take any random thought that goes through our mind and put it into communicable units so that we can bore our friends to death with what we had last night in our dreams. Or we can make them laugh, like I did earlier, or we can make them cry, hopefully not, and better, we can make them fall in love with us. So yes, language is really powerful. But is it just that? Is language just for speaking? Or, just like any other knowledge, changes what we see? Is it the case that what we say, the words we use to talk about the world, change how we perceive the world? Now, this question isn't entirely new, but it hadn't really received any empirical support. And in fact, if I'd asked this question about 20 years ago, they would have taken my PhD away, which is literally the equivalent of being burned at the stake for an academic. And the reason of why they would have done this is not because linguists were religious fanatics, but because we didn't know better. For us, obviously, language was for speaking. That's what we do with it. So anyone that did anything else with language, anyone that would try to ask any other question was just wasting their time. Well, we decided to question the obvious. We decided to go against this established paradigm. And what we found was really well worth the ride. Take, for example, this spectrum of color. It shows all the colors that the human eye can see, and what is striking at first is that all these colors nicely blend into each other. There are no boundaries in these colors that we could really objectively define. However, if I want to talk about these colors using language, I'm going to be forced to draw boundaries. And these boundaries are really arbitrary, to the point that if I want to describe this part of the spectrum, I would, for example, use the word red or the word pink. But take an equally large amount of the spectrum of colors and ask anybody to name any of the colors here, and what you're going to get most commonly is blue. But all languages aren't created equal. And if you spoke, for example, Greek or Russian or Japanese and many other languages that have this distinction, you would use the words halazio and bleu to talk about this spectrum, just like pink and red. And this is actually the ideal test case for the question that I asked before. And as a little reminder, this question is it the case that what we say changes what we see? This question, my two PhD supervisors were just asking it when I joined their lab. And to do so, they brought a bunch of Greek speakers who have those two words, along with a bunch of English speakers who poorly only have one word. And while their brain activity was being recorded, they showed them many, 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 many shades of blue. Not gray, but be rest assured there were more than 50. And what they saw from the activity that these Greek speakers, their brains generated, was that they saw the different shades of blue that pertain to the two different categories that they have in the language as much more different than the English speakers did. And they saw exactly the same colors. So you see, words are that powerful that what you say changes what you see. But why stop there? Let's try and push this power of words to its limits. Because sure, it's cool to know that what we say changes what we see. What would be really awesome would be if what we say makes us better at what we see. So in a very simple study that I conducted with my previous postdoc advisor, we did just that. We asked, is it the case that when it comes to detecting words in our environments, say dogs, if you use a word like dog, this very abstract thing, a word, compared to hearing, for example, the sound of an actual dog barking in the environment, is it the case that a word is still that powerful that it will make you better at detecting this thing in your environment? And this is exactly what we found. When people saw pictures of, for example, dogs, after hearing the word dog compared to hearing the sound of an actual dog barking, their brains, within 100 milliseconds, which is really, really, really fast, was able to detect whether it was seeing a dog or not. This does not happen for this very real sound. So language isn't just for speaking. Words literally reprogram our minds. Now, this is not a novel finding. This is not a cool finding. But it is downright a revolutionary finding that has changed completely the way that we understand how the human brain works. Now we know that our brains are much more flexible, much more connected, so that areas like language and vision can talk to each other to make us better at perceiving our environments. This is only the tip of the iceberg, and we have a lot more to discover. It's only taken us a few years. It wouldn't have happened if we hadn't questioned the obvious, if we hadn't gone against the established paradigm. Imagine if we all joined forces together and questioned what is obvious, what is so obvious that it stares at us in the face. Imagine what we could achieve in the next 10 years. Thank you.